Picture this. It's July. The highway shoulder is baking. I'm limping. My right knee is so swollen it's pulling the skin tight, and every single step feels like broken glass shifting under a kneecap. My baby girl, almost a year old, is on my left hip, her little fist wrapped around the collar of my shirt, holding on like she knows something is wrong. No phone. No car. No access to my own money. And somewhere back in that house, the house I'd been told over and over again to be grateful for, a woman was sitting at a locked desk with a folder that had my daughter's name on it. She had a doctor willing to call me mentally unstable in writing. She had church friends who believed everything she said. She had my car title locked in a drawer she thought I'd never find. What she didn't know was that I'd spent 5 months quietly building a case that would make every single person in that courtroom go dead silent. My name is Sarah. I'm a pharmacist. And I document everything. Stay with me, because what happened the morning after that walk down Route 7 is one of the most satisfying things I have ever watched unfold in a room full of people. And it all started with a green spiral notebook hidden in a box of tampons under a bathroom sink. Welcome to Silent Revenge. This is where ordinary women face extraordinary betrayals and win through patience, principle, and paperwork. If you've ever been told to be grateful for the bare minimum someone is using to control you, this story is for you. Hit subscribe. Let's go. You need to understand who I was before I became the woman limping down that highway with a baby and a busted knee. Because this story only makes sense if you know how put together I was, and how much that didn't protect me. I grew up outside Knoxville, Tennessee. My mom, Carol Whitman, died of breast cancer when I was 15. One morning in April, she was helping me flip through a catalog picking out a prom dress. 8 months later, I was standing at her grave in the cold, holding my 12-year-old brother Danny's hand while he whispered, "Can she still hear us?" I didn't know what to say, so I just held on tighter. My dad, Frank Whitman, was a county deputy. He worked back-to-back shifts. He grieved in the cab of his truck before he walked through the front door. I figured that out when I noticed his eyes were always red before he even sat down to dinner. So I started cooking. I packed Danny's lunches. I signed his permission slips. I kept the house quiet enough that when Dad finally sat at that pine kitchen table at 9 o'clock at night, he could close his eyes for just a second without the whole world falling in on him. My therapist, the one I found after all of this, would later call this over-responsibility. The bone-deep belief that if you just work hard enough, stay organized enough, see every problem before it blows up, you can hold anything together. Any family. Any situation. Any person who needs holding. I graduated high school with a 3.9. Earned a full scholarship to the pharmacy program at the University of Tennessee. By 24, I had my doctorate in pharmacy. By 26, I was running the inpatient dispensing unit at Blue Ridge Regional Medical Center in Bristol, Virginia, pulling 12-hour shifts, managing controlled substances, counseling patients on drug interactions, and coming home to a clean apartment with a budget spreadsheet on my refrigerator and a savings account that made me feel like I had finally built something solid. I felt untouchable. I was wrong. No spreadsheet in the world can protect you from the thing I didn't see coming. I met Marcus Webb at a Home Depot on a Saturday in February. I was picking up primer for my dad's guest bathroom. He was loading lumber into a cart for a deck he was building. He owned a small construction company, just him and 2 other guys in a work truck, but he'd built a reputation in the county for always finishing on time and never cutting corners. He had calloused hands and a laugh that caught me off guard. He carried my paint cans to my car without being asked, then stood in the parking lot talking to me for 45 minutes like neither of us had anywhere else to be. He felt like home. The kind you choose to build, not the kind you're handed. He was 32. I was 28. I was head over heels by April. He never talked about his dad. Said the man walked out when Marcus was 7 and there was nothing more to say about it. I should have pushed. I should have asked what had grown in that empty space over the next 25 years. But I was young and independent and I thought I knew what a good man looked like. What I didn't understand yet was that the outside of a person can look exactly right while the inside has been quietly shaped by someone else entirely. For decades, Marcus brought me to meet his mother, Beverly Webb, on a Sunday in March. The house sat at the end of a gravel road outside Bristol. 2 stories. White siding. Dark shutters. A porch swing that didn't swing because the chains had rusted stuck. Beverly opened the front door before we knocked. I noticed that. Filed it away somewhere without knowing why. She was 62. Silver hair pulled tight. A dish towel folded over her shoulder like a uniform she'd been wearing so long she'd forgotten it was there. When I walked into her kitchen, it smelled like bleach. Not the kind that says someone cleaned up a mess. Kind that says someone scrubbed until the surface forgot what used to be there at all. Assigned seats at the table. She told Marcus where to sit. She handed me water without asking if I wanted it. She said grace before I had my napkin unfolded. Marcus's younger sister, Tanya, was there too, 27 years old, sitting in the corner chair, phone in her lap. She watched me the whole meal the way a security camera watches a hallway. Steady. No expression. Never blinking for long. Beverly asked about my work. She already knew my job title, my hospital, my department, my shift schedule. Marcus must have told her everything. She smiled at me over the green bean casserole and said, "It's so nice Marcus finally brought home someone with something going for her." I smiled. I helped clear the dishes. Beverly set her hand on my wrist, light pressure but precise like a blood pressure cuff tightening, and said, "Oh honey, you don't need to do that. You should just be grateful we welcome you here." She said it sweetly, smiling. And I heard it the way you hear a smoke alarm going off in somebody else's building. Distant. Not yet your problem. That word, grateful, I would hear it dozens of times over the next 6 months. I started keeping count. Marcus and I married that October. Small ceremony at the church we'd been attending together. My dad walked me down the aisle. Danny read a poem he'd written himself on the back of a Waffle House napkin, which was the most Danny thing he could have done, and I cried. 40 guests. Beverly sat in the front row and cried too. I thought it was joy. Marcus suggested we move into his mother's house after the wedding. Just until we save for a down payment, babe. 6 months, tops. I ran the numbers. His construction income plus my pharmacy salary minus rent we weren't paying at Beverly's. We could stack away over $15,000 in 6 months. Made financial sense. And I am, above everything else, a woman who trusts the math. The first few months were fine. Beverly cooked dinner. She kept the house spotless. She brought fresh towels to our room upstairs without being asked. I told myself it was generosity. Then small things started to move. My car key disappeared from the hook by the front door. Beverly said she moved it to the kitchen drawer for safekeeping. The next week it was in her purse. The week after that I stopped asking where it was. She drove me where I needed to go, or Marcus did. She said it saved gas. She smiled every time she said it. She suggested I put my paycheck into a shared household account so we can manage things together. Marcus agreed before I could answer. I said I wanted to keep my own account. Marcus looked at Beverly. Beverly looked at me. "Course, honey," she said, smooth as butter. "Whatever you need." That night, Marcus told me I'd embarrassed his mother. I apologized. I tried to open my own checking account online that week. The nearest bank branch was 9 miles away. I no longer had a car. I want you to stop right here with me for a second. I am a pharmacist with a doctorate. I earn a solid income. And within 90 days of moving into that house, I had lost access to my own transportation, my finances, and any ability to make a decision about my own life. And not one single person had raised their voice or put a hand on me. Not yet. This is how it works. Not with a slap. With a smile. Beverly called my department head at the hospital that winter and told him I was taking a medical leave of absence. She did not ask me first. She told me 2 weeks later when I mentioned picking up a weekend shift. Oh honey, I already handled it. Dr. Ellison completely understands. I felt my whole chest lock up. I opened my mouth. I closed it because 3 days earlier I had noticed something on my phone. The battery was draining in 4 hours instead of 12. As a pharmacist, I counsel patients on prescription apps, monitoring software, digital tools. I recognized that battery pattern immediately. A background GPS app running location services around the clock. I found it hidden in my settings under a name that looked like a routine system update. I had never installed it. I confronted Marcus. He said he had no idea what I was talking about. I went to Beverly. Beverly tilted her head and said, "Sweetheart, are you sure you're not being a little paranoid? You know, with everything you've been through? Maybe we should have someone check on you." And right there, that was the moment everything clicked. If I reacted, they would use it. So I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I went upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed in the room Beverly had chosen for us, and I looked at my hands. Steady. They were always steady. This was not surrender. This was the moment I started planning. My daughter came into the world on a Wednesday morning in August at Blue Ridge Regional, the same hospital where I had worked for years. 6 pounds, 15 ounces. She had my eyes, Marcus's ears, and a cry that sounded exactly like she was asking a question she already knew the answer to. I held her against my chest in that delivery room and understood for the first time what the word unconditional really means. It doesn't mean easy. It means you would do anything. Stay anywhere. Bite your tongue through anything. Her name is Lily. Beverly showed up in the delivery room 35 minutes after I delivered. Nobody had called her. She came because Tanya, who had insisted on driving me to the hospital because Marcus was on a job site, had texted her the moment I went in. Beverly walked in, picked Lily up before I had finished the first feeding, and turned toward the nurse with my daughter held out like a trophy. "My granddaughter," she said. "Not their daughter. My granddaughter." I reached for the bedside phone and dialed my dad from memory. His number was one of the first things I ever memorized, long before phones started doing that for us. "Hi, Daddy. Baby's here. She's perfect." Tanya walked over, gentle as you please, took the receiver right out of the cradle, and told whoever was on the line that I needed to rest. She hung up my father before he could say a word back to me. Over the 6 weeks that followed, Beverly took over everything. When Lily ate. When Lily slept. Who held her and for how long. She made a color-coded feeding schedule and taped it to the refrigerator like Lily was an ICU patient and Beverly was the attending physician. I am a licensed healthcare professional, and I was being managed out of caring for my own child by a woman who treated ibuprofen like a miracle drug. Then came the home visit I didn't know was coming. A man named Dr. Harold Sims knocked on the front door on a Thursday afternoon. He was Beverly's family doctor and, I found out later, a regular at her church. White hair, soft handshake, a medical bag that looked like it was from another decade. Beverly told me he was there to check on the baby. He checked the baby for 4 minutes. Then he turned to me. "Sarah, how have you been feeling? Any trouble sleeping? Periods of crying you can't explain? Trouble feeling connected to the baby?" I recognized those questions immediately. That's a postpartum depression screening, a standard PHQ-9. I'd seen it used hundreds of times in clinical settings. But this version had been loaded. Every question was angled toward one answer. And Beverly was standing in the doorway with her arms folded, watching. I answered the way I would document a patient assessment. My bond with Lily is strong. My sleep is disrupted, which is completely normal for a mother with a 6-week-old. My overall distress level is maybe a 3 out of 10, well within the normal range for new moms. Dr. Sims blinked. He wasn't used to the patient grading her own exam. Beverly stepped in. "She's very good at hiding it, doctor." You should really see her at night. I looked at Beverly. She looked back. No warmth at all. Just math. Dr. Sims thanked us, wrote something in a small notepad, and left. I stood at the living room window and watched his car pull away. Beverly had just handed a medical opinion, from a man she picked and coached, to whatever file she was quietly building on me. She wasn't worried. She was constructing. I understood something then that I hadn't before. The threat wasn't Beverly's anger. It was her patience. I started writing on a Monday in December, 7 months into living under Beverly's roof. I used a small spiral notebook. College ruled, 70 pages, green cover. I kept it wrapped in a plastic grocery bag inside a box of tampons under the bathroom sink. Beverly inventoried the kitchen cabinets, the bedroom closets, and the linen drawers. She did not go through feminine hygiene products. I used a documentation format called SOAP, the same structure used in medical and pharmacy settings. Subjective, what someone said. Objective, what I physically observed or could prove. Assessment, what it meant. Plan, what I was going to do about it. Entry 1. December 3rd, subjective. Beverly Webb stated, "You should be grateful we let you live here." First said October 14th at dinner. Said again 9 more times in various forms since. Objective. My car key was taken within 14 days of moving in. Beverly now controls my transportation. My employer was contacted without my knowledge or consent. My phone was accessed and a tracking app installed without my permission. Assessment. This is a pattern of coercive control, systematic isolation from transportation, employment, and financial independence, consistent with Virginia Code Section 16.1 to 228. Plan. Keep documenting. Find a lawyer when I can safely get to a phone. I wrote that first entry while Beverly scrubbed the counter 4 feet away from me. The bleach was so strong my eyes were watering. She wiped in tight circles, the same controlled motion she applied to everything in her world. Control expressed through chemistry. For the first time in 6 months, I didn't flinch at the smell. I was building something she couldn't bleach away. Meanwhile, Tanya was running her own operation. She was the one doing Beverly's dirty work out in public, slowly poisoning my reputation the way a slow leak ruins a foundation. You don't notice until the floor gives way. She told women at church that I was struggling with some mental health issues and wasn't up for visitors. She told the grocery store cashier I was overwhelmed by the baby. She told our neighbor Mrs. Hendricks to hold off on the casseroles because I wasn't really in a place to have company. One by one, the people who might have knocked on that door stopped showing up. I found out how bad it was when I overheard Tanya on her phone in the back hallway one afternoon while Lily was napping. I'm honestly really worried about her. She barely comes out of her room. Marcus is basically doing everything. I stood in that hallway with a burp cloth over my shoulder, listening to someone describe a version of my life I did not recognize. But then, 2 days later, I found out something worse. Beverly left her phone on the kitchen counter while she stepped outside to check the mail. I walked past it and saw the screen lit up, a text thread with Tanya. Photos. Dozens of them. All of me. Taken without me knowing. The me with unwashed hair. The me with dark circles. The me in the same shirt 2 days in a row. Timestamps like Tuesday 2 p.m. and Thursday. Hasn't showered again. Shot from doorways I didn't realize were cracked open. They weren't documenting a woman in crisis. They were manufacturing one. The woman in those pictures was exhausted because someone had taken her car, her job, her phone, her income, and her ability to call her own father. But she wasn't losing her mind. She was being slowly taken apart, piece by piece, so someone else could point to the wreckage and call it evidence. I went back to my green notebook and wrote entry 19. If you've ever sat across from someone who is smiling at you while actively destroying your life, you already know the feeling I'm describing. It's not rage. It's a cold, quiet clarity. And clarity is the most dangerous thing a woman like Beverly could hand someone like me. Keep watching. 'Cause what I found in that desk drawer changed everything. The moment that flipped this whole story happened on a Thursday morning in February. Lily had a routine 4-month immunization appointment. Beverly allowed these without any fight. She knew that skipping a baby's vaccines looks terrible to outsiders, and Beverly never ever let anything look bad from the outside. She drove us to the pediatrician, parked with the engine running, and sat in the car with the Christian radio station on. I carried Lily inside. Lily's vaccination records were kept in Beverly's locked study desk. For organization, she always said. I needed the yellow card for the appointment. Beverly had told me that morning she'd left it on the counter. She hadn't, which meant I needed the key to the desk. I already knew where it was. I'd spotted it back in November, taped with a little strip of masking tape to the underside of the kitchen junk drawer, tucked behind a pile of dead batteries and takeout menus. Beverly had hidden it the same way people hide a spare house key under a doormat. It's only hidden from people who aren't looking. I peeled it free, walked to the study, unlocked the drawer. The vaccination card was right on top. That's what I came for. But underneath it, there was a plain manila folder with no label. I picked it up. It was heavier than it should have been. Inside were 3 documents. The first was a custody petition, typed on the letterhead of Dalton and Hendricks, attorneys at law, Bristol, Virginia. The grounds were laid out in a numbered paragraph. The mother exhibits signs of postpartum psychosis, has refused recommended treatment, and poses a material risk to the health and safety of the minor child. And signed. Dated 11 days earlier. The second document was my car title. My name, Sarah Elizabeth Webb, printed right there on the owner line. Title Beverly told me was still being processed at the DMV. It had never left that drawer. The third was a letter on Dr. Sims's official letterhead, addressed to the Honorable Judge Raymond K. Bowen of the Sullivan County Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court. In it, Dr. Sims outlined his professional concerns about my mental state, citing emotional instability, detachment from the infant, and resistance to family intervention. He used the phrase postpartum psychosis 2 times. He was a family doctor. General practice. He was not a psychiatrist. Not a psychologist. Under DSM-5 standards, he had 0 authority to diagnose postpartum psychosis. That diagnosis requires a licensed mental health professional. He didn't come close to qualifying. My hands were shaking when I finished reading. Not because I was scared. 'Cause I knew exactly what I was looking at. This was not a worried family. This was a case file. And I was the defendant in a trial that had been going on for months without my knowledge. I found an old digital point-and-shoot camera in the junk drawer. No tracking app on a camera. I photographed every single page. I put everything back in the exact order I'd found it. I locked the drawer. I retaped the key to the underside of the junk drawer with that same strip of masking tape. I walked back past the empty key hook by the front door. For 6 months I had looked at that hook and felt nothing but loss. That day I looked at it and felt something completely different. I looked at it and saw evidence. That night, after Beverly was asleep and Marcus had drifted off, I sat on the bathroom floor with my green notebook and wrote entry 31. I documented everything, the custody petition, the car title, the letter, and I cross-referenced Dr. Sims's medical credentials against the diagnostic claim he was making. Family physician. Board certified in general practice. No psychiatric training. No authority to make this call. One line at the bottom of that entry. Letter constitutes a scope of practice violation. My notebook now had 31 entries covering 4.5 months. I needed a lawyer. I couldn't call one from any phone in that house. But they had made one mistake. One tiny crack in the system they'd built around me. And I was about to find it. Crack was Lily's next pediatrician visit. Tanya had a cold that day, so it was just Beverly and me. Beverly parked with the engine running. I carried Lily inside. After the appointment, I asked the nurse if I could use the restroom. She pointed down the hall. I walked past the restroom to a small alcove by the back office where a desk phone sat next to a fax machine. I dialed the Virginia Family Violence Hotline, a number I had memorized off a pamphlet I'd spotted pinned to the pharmacy break room bulletin board 4 months earlier, when I was still wondering if what was happening to me even had a name. Call lasted 3 minutes. A woman gave me the name of a legal aid attorney named Monica Garrett, who took coercive control cases on a pro bono basis through a clinic in Kingsport. I said the number back to her twice. I hung up. I walked back to Lily. I picked her up. I walked to Beverly's car. "She's growing perfectly," I said. "Everything looks great." Beverly smiled. "Good. I've been so worried about her." I smiled back, and it was the most real smile I'd worn in 6 months because I had just made the first move. Over the next 2 weeks, I made 4 phone calls to Monica Garrett. The first from the pediatrician's office. The second from a grocery store. Beverly still allowed supervised shopping trips with Tanya, and I told Tanya I needed the restroom and used the courtesy phone near the deli counter. The third and fourth from my neighbor Mrs. Paulson's house. She was 74, widowed, and absolutely delighted every time I knocked on her door. I walked over twice with Lily on my hip and told Beverly I was returning a borrowed dish. Mrs. Paulson held Lily and sang her old hymns off-key in the living room while I stood in her kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear and read Monica Garrett every entry in my green notebook. All 38 of them. When I finished, Monica was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Sarah, this is the most organized coercive control documentation I have ever received. You wrote it like a clinical chart." "I work in clinical settings," I said. Monica laid out the plan clearly. 1. I had to be physically out of Beverly's house before we filed anything. If Beverly filed her petition while I was still living there, I would be the one playing defense. 2. Once I was out, Monica would file for an emergency protective order based on the full documented pattern: isolation, employment sabotage, financial control, electronic surveillance, and medical gaslighting by an unqualified provider. 3. At the same time, petition for temporary sole custody. The notebook would be the centerpiece. Then she said the line that made my chest go cold. "Sarah, if Beverly files before you leave, you lose the upper hand completely. I need you out of that house within the week." Beverly noticed I was different. She'd spent half a year watching a woman slowly fold in on herself. Now that woman was making direct eye contact at the kitchen table. Sleeping through the night. Standing up straight. Something had shifted, and Beverly felt it the way a hunter feels a wind change. "You seem different lately, Sarah," she said one Tuesday morning, pouring me coffee she hadn't offered in weeks. "Lily slept well," I said. Beverly studied me over the rim of her own mug. Then she moved. No more solo grocery trips. Tanya would be with me every time. She double-checked the study desk drawer and found everything in perfect order. She scheduled another home visit from Dr. Sims. That night, I pressed my ear to the floor vent in the upstairs hallway. Beverly's voice drifted up from the study below, low and clipped. "I think we need to file this week, before she does something we can't undo." I stood in the dark with my hand flat against the wall and my heart hammering against my ribs. Timeline Monica had warned me about had just collapsed. The next morning, I was up before dawn. I nursed Lily in the gray early light, dressed her in a warm onesie, and packed a bag quietly: diapers, formula, a change of clothes for her, and the green spiral notebook wrapped in its plastic bag. I tucked everything into the stroller basket near the front door and waited. Marcus came downstairs at 7. Poured cereal. Ate standing up. Beverly came down at 7:30, already dressed, already alert, already watching. At 8 o'clock, I picked up Lily and walked to the front door. Marcus moved into the doorframe. "Where are you going?" "Just taking Lily for a walk." "Mom said you should stay in. Dr. Sims is coming this afternoon." "I'll be back before then." I stepped around him. He grabbed my arm hard. his hand wrapped above my elbow and pulled down. My foot caught the doorframe and my knee hit the wood with a crack I felt all the way up through my spine. I twisted as I went down to keep Lily off the floor. Pain lit up my whole right side. Lily screamed. I stood up. The Marcus let go of my arm. He stared at his own hand like it belonged to a stranger. I didn't wait for the rest of it. I grabbed the stroller bag, tucked Lily against my chest, and walked out that door. He didn't follow. I looked back once. He was standing in the doorframe, staring at his open palm in the morning light. Then I turned around and I kept walking. And I did not look back again. Route 7 cuts north to south through the valley. 2 lanes, no sidewalk, gravel shoulders that catch the morning dew. July had come in hot that year, and by 8:15 the blacktop was already throwing heat up from the ground. I limped. My right knee was swelling fast, hot and tight under the skin. Lily was quiet on my left hip, her little fist still wrapped tight around my shirt collar. Town was 3 miles south. Dad's house was 14 miles north. I could not walk 14 miles with a baby and a knee that felt like it was packed with gravel. I thought I could manage 3. Every step on that gravel shoulder made a small, sharp sound, like something tiny breaking over and over. I had been out there about 25 minutes when I heard an engine slow down behind me. Dark green Ford F-250. 12 years old. A rust spot above the right rear wheel well from the time Danny backed into a fire hydrant in the Kroger parking lot when he was 16. I knew that truck like I knew my own heartbeat. Pulled up alongside me. Passenger window came down. My dad looked at me. Then at Lily. Then at my knee, swollen up above the strap of my sandal and already turning colors. The muscle in his jaw tightened. The same muscle that flexed when he stood at my mom's casket and made a private promise to himself not to fall apart in front of his kids. Sarah Beth. His voice was low. Where is your car? My mother-in-law took it, I said. Told me I should be grateful they let me live there. Dad was still for 3 seconds. 4. Engine idling. Get in. A beat. This ends today. He said it the way he used to say lights out when I was 9 years old. Calm. Final. Not open for discussion. I opened the door. The car seat was in the back. He had kept it there since the week Lily was born, strapped in and ready behind the driver's seat. Just in case. I buckled Lily in. I got in. I closed the door. He drove. He didn't say a word for 5 full minutes. Then, quietly, tell me everything. So I did. That pine table in Dad's kitchen had 30 years of scratches in it, from dinner plates and homework folders and the edge of my mom's old sewing machine. I sat in my chair, the one closest to the window, and I told him everything. 6 months of keys and deleted phone numbers and tracking apps and a locked desk and a family doctor writing letters he wasn't qualified to write. Dad listened the way he listened to witness statements his whole career. Hands folded. Eyes on me. He asked exactly 2 questions. Did he put his hands on you? He grabbed my arm. I fell. Is Lily safe right now? She's in your living room, Dad. She's safe. He called Monica Garrett that evening. Turns out he already had her number. He'd tracked it down through a contact at the sheriff's department 3 weeks earlier, after Beverly had intercepted his Sunday calls for 4 straight months and turned him away at the front door twice when he drove out unannounced. 30 years in law enforcement had taught him every sign of what isolation does to a person. He had been waiting quietly for me to ask for help. Monica arrived at 7 p.m., 53 years old. Gray streak in her hair. Reading glasses on a chain. A briefcase that had seen the inside of more courtrooms than I could count. I handed her the green notebook. She read every entry, cover to cover, without rushing or skipping. When she closed it, she looked up. We file first thing tomorrow. Emergency protective order based on this documented pattern. simultaneous petition for temporary sole custody. This notebook is the centerpiece of everything. She looked at my knee, which had turned the color of a bad storm. Get photographs of that tonight. Ice it, but don't let the swelling go down completely before we walk into that courtroom. I nodded. When you testify, Monica said, speak the way you document. Calm. Specific. No drama. I've been doing that for 5 months, I said. She looked at me for a moment. I know. That's exactly why we're going to win. That night, Beverly's attorneys called Dad's landline. He unplugged it after 30 seconds. What happened in Beverly's house that night, I found out during depositions months later. Marcus sat on the couch staring at the floor. Tanya stood in the hallway running her own calculations. Beverly paced the kitchen in those tight, clicking heels. Then she stopped. She sat down in her chair at the head of the table, the one nobody else was allowed to use. And for one moment her voice dropped to something raw. I can't lose another one, Marcus, she said. I can't go through that again. For one breath, she wasn't the woman who had taken my keys and sabotaged my job and built a case to take my child. She was a woman whose husband had walked out 23 years ago, still standing at the same front door, still terrified of being left behind. Then she picked up her phone and called Dalton and Hendricks. File the petition tonight, she said. Monica called me an hour later to tell me Beverly had filed. I won't pretend the floor didn't shift under me when I heard it. But here is what pharmacy teaches you. The first person to chart doesn't win. Person with the accurate chart wins. I put on my pharmacy scrubs the next morning. Not because I was going to work. 'Cause scrubs are my uniform. And when the rest of the world is trying to tell you who you are, a uniform reminds you who you already know yourself to be. Navy top. Drawstring pants. White sneakers. Hair up and out of my face. Dad made coffee and eggs. Lily sat in a borrowed high chair, working on a bottle. Monica arrived at 8:15 with a binder she had assembled overnight from my notebook entries, printed, tabulated, separated with colored tabs. The photos I'd taken of Beverly's documents were printed on glossy paper. Custody petition. My car title. Dr. Sims's letter. Judge Bowen's docket opens at 10, she said. Both petitions together. Beverly's first, then yours. We drove to the Sullivan County Courthouse. Dad stayed back with Lily. I walked through the metal detector in scrubs and sneakers. The courtroom was small. 20 seats in the gallery, fluorescent lights, a water stain on the ceiling above the judge's bench. Beverly was already there in a charcoal blazer and pearl earrings, her posture magazine perfect. Marcus sat beside her in a sport coat I'd never seen on him before. Tanya was in the row behind, phone face down on her knee for once. Beverly's attorney, Robert Dalton, silver hair, monogrammed cufflinks, arranged his papers at the petitioner's table. I sat down next to Monica. I set the binder in front of me. I folded my hands. I walked into that courtroom in scrubs. Beverly came in pearls. But I had something she didn't have, 52 pages of documented truth, dated and signed in my own handwriting. Judge Raymond Bowen entered at 10:02. Gray beard. Reading glasses. A voice like gravel being poured into a bucket. He announced both petitions would be heard back to back, Beverly's first. Robert Dalton stood and made his case. He was polished and professional, working from a script that assumed nobody in the room would actually check the footnotes. Your Honor, my client is a devoted grandmother seeking emergency custody of her infant granddaughter. The child's mother has exhibited troubling behavior, withdrawal from family support, refusal of recommended treatment, signs of emotional instability. The family's physician, Dr. Harold Sims, has provided a written professional assessment of his concerns. He submitted Dr. Sims's letter. He submitted Tanya's photos of me looking exhausted. He submitted 2 written statements from church members who said I seemed withdrawn and not like myself. Then Beverly took the stand. She was genuinely impressive. She cried at exactly the right times. She paused at exactly the right times. She said your honor with perfect weight and perfect deference. I love that little girl more than anything in this world. Her mama, Sarah, she's a sweet girl, but she hasn't been well. We tried to help. We tried everything we could. But she kept refusing, and I am absolutely terrified that if someone doesn't step in, something terrible is going to happen to that baby. The gallery murmured. Beverly's pastor, sitting in the third row, nodded slowly. Judge Bowen wrote something on his yellow legal pad and looked up. Respondents' counsel. Monica stood, buttoned her jacket, looked at me. Ms. Webb. Your witness. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my scrubs the way I always smooth them before stepping into a patient's room. Force of habit, a reset, my body's way of saying I am ready. I picked up the binder. I walked to the witness stand. I sat down. I opened to the first tab. Monica approached. Ms. Webb, can you walk the court through your experience living in the Webb household over the past 6 months? I looked out at the room. Beverly was watching me the way she had watched me across every dinner table for the past year. Measuring. Waiting for me to crack. Marcus was staring at the table surface. Tanya's hands were still in her lap. Beverly's pastor leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. Judge Bowen's pen was ready. I thought about my dad the night before on his porch. You know this case better than anyone in that room. I thought about Beverly's hand on my wrist the first time she told me to be grateful. I thought about the crack of my knee against that door frame and Lily screaming. I thought about a green spiral notebook in a plastic bag inside a box of tampons under a bathroom sink in a house I was never going back to. I opened my mouth. And I spoke the way I chart. Entry 1. December 3rd, subjective. Beverly Webb stated, quote, "You should be grateful we let you live here." First said October 14th, repeated in documented form on 10 additional occasions. Objective. My vehicle keys were removed from common access within 14 days of moving in. My car title in my legal name was subsequently removed from my possession and stored in a locked desk. Assessment. Systematic isolation from personal transportation. No tears. No tremor. Just facts in order with dates attached. Monica walked me through each tab. I didn't rush. Entry 12. January 9th, subjective. GPS tracking application discovered on my personal cell phone, installed without my knowledge or consent. Objective. Battery drain consistent with continuous background location tracking. Not visible in my download history. Assessment. Electronic surveillance by a household member without consent. Beverly's attorney was flipping through papers searching for something to object to. There was nothing. These were dates and direct observations. Not opinions. Not emotions. Facts. Entry 31. February 17th, subjective. Located an unsigned custody petition in Beverly Webb's locked desk, prepared by Dalton and Hendricks, dated 11 days prior. Grounds listed: postpartum psychosis. Objective. A diagnosis of postpartum psychosis requires evaluation by a licensed psychiatrist or psychologist. The letter supporting this petition was written by Dr. Harold Sims, a general practice family physician with no psychiatric credentials. Assessment. The custody petition is built on a diagnostic claim from a provider who is not qualified to make it. I heard a sound from the gallery. I looked up. Beverly's pastor was no longer leaning forward. He had sat back. His hands were open and flat on his knees. He wasn't nodding anymore. Monica handed me the glossy prints, the custody petition and my car title, side by side. This is the petition Mrs. Webb prepared to take my daughter. And this is my car title in my name that she told me was at the DMV. It was in her locked desk the entire time. For seconds of pure silence in that courtroom. Then Beverly stood up. Robert Dalton reached for her arm. She shook him off. That is a flat-out lie. Her voice broke on the last word. She broke into my private desk. She had absolutely no right. Mrs. Webb. I gave that boy everything. I gave them both a roof, food on the table, I gave them everything I had, and this is what she... Mrs. Webb. Judge Bowen's voice cut through the room like a door slamming shut. Sit down, or I will have you removed from this courtroom. The bailiff in the corner shifted his weight. Beverly's hands were shaking at her sides. She looked at me, and for the first time in 6 months I could see it, the thing underneath all that control. The desperation. The fear of being abandoned again, the same fear that had been driving this for years before I ever walked through her front door. Then she sat down. She said one last thing. Barely a whisper. She's manipulating every single one of you. But in the gallery, her pastor had both hands flat on his knees and was staring at the floor. I sat on the witness stand. Hands folded. Breathing even. Completely still. Beverly was shaking. I was still. The whole room felt it. Monica's closing statement was short. Your Honor, Ms. Webb has presented 52 documented incidents of coercive control spanning 6 months. Confiscation of transportation. Unauthorized termination of employment. Financial restriction. Electronic surveillance. Social isolation. And a psychiatric diagnosis rendered by a general practice physician who lacks the credentials to make it. The physical injury documented in Ms. Webb's most recent entry, and visible on her knee in this courtroom right now, meets the threshold for an emergency protective order under Virginia Code Section 16.1 to 279.1. Judge Bowen read his notes for 90 seconds. The room was completely quiet. Then he spoke. First, Beverly Webb's petition for emergency custody denied. No credible medical evidence supports a diagnosis of postpartum psychosis. Dr. Sims's letter does not meet the required diagnostic standard. Second, Sarah Webb's petition for an emergency protective order granted. Marcus Webb is named for physical contact. Beverly Webb is named for harassment and restricted contact. Duration, 15 days with a hearing to extend. Third, temporary sole legal and physical custody of Lily Marie Webb, granted to Sarah Elizabeth Webb, pending a full custody hearing within 30 days. Fourth, the vehicle titled in Sarah Webb's name is to be returned to her possession within 48 hours. I exhaled. My lungs filled with courthouse air, old carpet and toner, and the particular stillness of a room where people's lives change on paper. I closed the binder. I stood up. On the way out, Monica paused just long enough at Beverly's table to say quietly, Mrs. Webb, you should be grateful she's letting you see that little girl at all. Beverly said nothing. Her hands were flat on the table. In the hallway, Marcus stepped into my path. 2 feet away. Hands at his sides, palms facing up. Sarah. His voice was barely there. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Mom always said, I thought. I looked at him for a long moment. 34 years old, standing in a courthouse hallway in a borrowed sport coat. A man who had let someone else do his thinking for so long he'd genuinely forgotten he had a mind of his own. Your mother raised you to be afraid of a woman who has a car key, I said. I'm going to raise Lily to never be afraid of anything. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I walked past him, through the metal detector, through the glass doors, and out into the July heat where the parking lot blacktop was cooking under the sun and the air tasted like hot pavement and the cleanest kind of freedom I had ever breathed. Tanya was leaning against Beverly's car, phone in hand, thumbs frozen. For the first time in 6 months, she had absolutely nothing to report. She looked at me. I looked at her. We didn't say a word. Dad was sitting on the bench outside the courthouse entrance with Lily on his lap, feeding her a bottle he'd warmed up in his truck's cup holder. He looked up when he saw my face. He didn't ask a single question. He just gave me that nod. The same slow, single nod he'd given me at my college graduation, at my mom's funeral, the altar on my wedding day. The nod that means I see you. I'm proud of you. I picked up my daughter. Hey, baby girl. Mama's here. 2 weeks later, Lily and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on Maple Street, 6 miles from Dad's house. The landlord, a retired middle school teacher named Mr. Garrison, handed me the key and said, "The kitchen gets beautiful morning light. You're going to love it here." The first thing I did was go to the hardware store, the same one where I'd met Marcus 4 years earlier, and buy a key hook. Brass. Simple. No ornament. Just a hook and 2 screws. I hung it by the front door. I put my car key on it. My car had been dropped in Dad's driveway 46 hours after the ruling, left by Marcus without a knock or a word. It still smelled like Beverly's lavender air freshener. I drove it home with every single window rolled all the way down. Here's what the months after looked like. Monica filed my divorce through a domestic violence legal aid grant. The emergency protective order became a full 2-year no-contact order, covering both Marcus and Beverly. Beverly's custody petition was dismissed with prejudice, meaning she cannot refile on those same grounds. Ever. I filed a formal complaint against Dr. Sims with the Virginia Board of Medicine for providing a diagnostic-level mental health assessment that was completely outside his scope of practice as a general physician. He received a formal letter of reprimand 4 months later. Tanya was named in the protective order for her role in the phone surveillance. The tracking app data was submitted as evidence. She moved out of Beverly's house in September. I don't know if she left on her own or if Beverly pushed her out. Either way, she's gone. Marcus pleaded no contest to simple assault. 30 hours of community service and mandatory anger management. The divorce was finalized the following December. I went back to work at Blue Ridge Regional. Dr. Ellison met me at the pharmacy window on my first shift back and said, "We held your position, Sarah. Beverly called and told us you were on medical leave, but we couldn't reach you to confirm it. Your phone was disconnected, your emails bounced. We flagged it as suspicious and kept you on the books." I started seeing a therapist that fall. My choice. My schedule. Practice I drove myself to in my own car. Not because Beverly was right about me, she was completely wrong. But because I needed someone qualified to help me understand how a smart, organized, educated woman can spend 6 months in a house that is slowly collapsing around her and still believe she can fix it from the inside. My therapist told me the reason is that I could have fixed it. I just needed a different set of tools. She was right. And I had already found them. 70 pages. Green cover. Soap format. Here's what I need you to take away from all of this. Gratitude is real. It's a beautiful thing. But gratitude is not a leash. Nobody, not a mother-in-law, not a spouse, not a pastor, not a doctor with a notepad, gets to tell you to be grateful for the roof they're using to trap you. Your car belongs to you. Your phone belongs to you. Your paycheck belongs to you. Your kids belong with you. And that door they've been locking from the outside? It has always opened from your side. You just have to decide it's time to push. That's my story. 6 months of bleach and locked drawers, 1 highway, 1 green notebook, and a dad who showed up in a rust-spotted pickup truck at exactly the right moment. Not to rescue me because I didn't need rescuing. To remind me that I had never actually lost the ability to save myself. If this story hit something in you, if some part of it felt familiar, please share it. Put it in front of someone who needs it. Might be the thing that helps them pick up a pen and start writing. Drop a comment below. I read every single one. If you're new here, hit subscribe and come back for the next story. Last night, Lily and I walked up the driveway to our apartment. The gravel crunched under my shoes. My shoes. On my gravel. In front of my door. I put my key on my hook. And I chose every single step.